Okay, let me know if you guys can hear me all right. Let me just get one thing here too. As always, there we go. That's a little better. Let me turn down this lighting. I don't know what's going on with these streaks here. Jesus, what is going on, guys? Hopefully you can hear me. And then let me see if I can get to focus better. There you go. I just completely ruined the focus. Hopefully that's cool. What is with that lighting? Would a different color work better? We're going with red, aren't we? All right. Audio is good. I love how there were a few comments that said, that's still a little goofy, though, with that lighting. I'm going to move this over here because for whatever reason, I'm getting some bizarre streaks. Of the people saying that it's muted, well, everyone else can hear me fine. It's just like, yeah, people just can't be bothered to check their own audio before talking, can they? Okay. So, welcome to Loose Ends. It's a little late, but, it is what it is. Loose Ends is generally done either the last week of the month or I would say before 2 weeks have passed in the next month. And I try to fit it in between die shrinks and broken silicons because you don't want to do like a broken silicon, a die shrink, and like 2 videos and a loose ends in the same week. Just bombard you guys. So I figured now was a good time to do it. And actually, for this loose ends, I'm going to start switching things up, playing with the format more. Let's see. Yeah, so if I put my hair there, it just completely messes with the lighting. That's hilarious. Unlike before, I am going to accept questions right away from the live chat. I've decided that instead of doing things in segmented sections, I'm going to be here for 1 to 2 hours, depending on if there's a lot of good questions, both from the patrons in the Discord, in the After Video Chat channel, and from you all in the live chat. So don't hold back. Feel free to ask questions right now in the live chat from the beginning, and I will just work in the notes I have ahead of time in between the questions. Now, if you do a tipped question, obviously I'm far more likely to notice it. Otherwise, I will answer what I want to. That is what it is. So again, I will be looking for those tipped questions and stuff from the patrons in the Discord. And otherwise, I'm just going to start going through the stuff I need to get through. I think I said the same thing like 3 times in a row, but this is live, so oh well. Okay, so intro was there, and I am, of course, writing down the timestamps for future people. Okay, so let me see here. What do I start with? Well, let's start with things from this month, right? And the first thing, and the lighting is red for a reason, is going to be RDNA. Let me see here. I got a tipped question. Right. So, like I said, I will answer this first. So, Samsung 0804 writes in, thank you for the tip. I've clearly not been keeping up adequately if I've missed it, but have you heard anything from Samsung Exynos mobile SoCs and RDNA graphics? I mean, I think everyone pretty much knows what there is to know from public information, right? The Samsung is licensing RDNA IP to make the graphics in their Exynos chips better than it would be without it, right? And I think benchmarks, if I remember correctly, are emerging right now that, lo and behold, show that when you leverage from one of the major high-performance graphics companies, there's Nvidia, AMD, some might argue Intel, but I don't know if I would yet, that if you combine that with them, it's better than what Samsung could do on their own. So there's really not much else to say besides that. Actually, some of the sources I talked to disagreed that it's fair to call it RDNA graphics in Samsung phones. It's really just parts of the RDNA IP, but it is performing well. So That's really all I can say to your question. Oh, a tip from Lawrence. Love the show. Well, thank you. But anyway, speaking of RDNA, I guess now is a good time to go right into RDNA 3 stuff. So I'm just going to, things that I didn't get to say this month about subjects we talked about the news. Number one is RDNA 3. And I feel like at this point, I now firmly have a couple of new sources. We won't say exactly how they are within or connected to AMD that I feel pretty confident following here. And I've seen a lot of people, especially after my Bergamo, which maybe I'm not saying it right. Sorry, I'm not Italian. I think it's Bergamo, actually, isn't it? It's Bergamo, isn't it? Bergamo is probably how you say it. That they're asking, okay, well, you have these new great AMD sources. What is there to say about RDNA 3? And I'm just kind of telling you guys here up front, I put out 2 RDNA 3 leaks in the past couple months. Both what was it? I think there was an RDNA 3 early whispers video. And then after that, I did the RDNA 3 doomsday scenario where I looked at the more optimistic info I've heard. Watch those if you want to know how good RDNA 3 is, because I really don't have... I'm not putting, that's based on what I'm told by these new AMD sources, very, very accurate, actually, which is to say, what do we say, right? Anyone expecting RDNA 3 to be like a 30 to 40% boost is wrong. It is not. At the same time, to expect it to be a 3x boost is absurd, and there's no evidence that it is. Anyone saying RDNA 3 is for sure going to be a 3x boost over top RDNA 2 is, clickbaiting. Let's be honest, everybody. They're clickbaiting. What I can say, though, is if you watch what I said in that RDNA 3 Doomsday video and then look at what I also said before that, it's pretty clear what I'm getting to here. It's safe to assume 60 to 80% performance over the 6900 XT unless something goes wrong at the last minute with their chiplet architecture for RDNA 3. And additionally, it could double performance. Now, if doubling performance means 90% more, 110% more, hard to say. But at this point, I think that's what I would say, is that right now it's not absurd to think it's going to double performance, and that at the very least it seems like Nvidia's in a lot of trouble potentially next year. But I wouldn't double down quite yet. I would just continue to communicate to you guys that it seems like AMD is going to win the graphics game, at least temporarily next year. And unless there's some secret at Nvidia, which, let's remember, if there was any company that I would most easily believe has an architecture that's being underestimated, it's Nvidia. They always seem to just come out swinging no matter what, at least in the past decade. So I would say to count Nvidia out would be absurd. I mean, Jensen wants to win and he has the resources. So I wouldn't say that, but at least right now, AMD's confidence, I've just never seen it be higher. And when it comes to the last few releases compared to now. And additionally, if AMD does take the crown, what I said about pricing in that doomsday scenario video seems pretty close to what they're already talking about doing. So unfortunately, how do I think about RDNA 3 pricing? Like, let's say the top card is $2,000. Well, it depends, right? If it's double a 6900 XT, I mean, if you think about it, the 6900 XT is really good at 4K gaming. Even if you turn down, you don't even need to turn down a couple settings in most games. You can do like 4K 120 with the 6900 XT. If they double that performance, 8K 60 is totally doable now, and 4K 240 hertz is totally doable now, as long as you don't expect to max out settings, which anyone doing 240 hertz gaming is used to turning down a couple settings to hit that high frame rate. So as much as $2,000 sounds like as much as $2,000 is more than I'm going to pay for a graphics card, at least you can make the argument that 8K, possibly 8K 90 hertz gaming is now on the table, which, at least it won't be as dumb as the 3090, but it would be, I don't know. I don't think graphics cards should cost that much, but that's just me, you know. A lot of people seem to disagree with me lately. So that's what I'll say about RDNA 3. And then I guess let's just transition right into, since I still don't see any more tipped questions, I'll go right to the Nvidia next, which is something I want to get to. Notice I say Nvidia next in the title, and notice that I haven't been calling it Lovelace like some of those clickbaiting tech tubers do. And that's because at least right now I'm under the impression Lovelace is some entirely different thing, and that if it's not called Hopper, it's called something else. And that's really all I can say. You know, I haven't put out a video doubling down on it, but I did say that actually in my RDNA 3 Doomsday video. So I guess that's kind of what I will say. What I will also say, though, is that you should not expect NVIDIA's next lineup to be weak, though. It's not like NVIDIA but at the end of next year is going to launch something that's 30% better. It sounds like it's going to be another Ampere level increase at least. So as much, you know, as I say, I think AMD could win, don't expect NVIDIA to be like, you know, out in the woods either, which is to say, and I will have some reader mails to get to about this in this video, I think we're looking at the end of next year, real big performance increases again, guys, which should make you think twice about overpaying for graphics cards right now, which, speaking of overpaying for graphics cards, I guess let me just start talking about the 3080 Ti right now as well. That was another thing I want to get to from this month. As you guys know, I did the 3080 Ti and A6000 review, although it was really more of a 3080 Ti review with the A6000 there for comparison purposes. And there's a few things I just want to cover quickly from the review. Number one, the graphics cards were not artifacting in Metro Exodus. That's a game that takes place in high radiation areas, and that's how they show there's radiation. And in fact, I thought it was kind of funny how many people didn't think maybe it was radiation because it was green dots. So I don't know, but look it up, people. I thought, and I double checked YouTube, just like, oh, am I crazy? You know, but no, those cards were all very stable. And I didn't do super aggressive overclocks because I don't tend to do that in reviews either. So that's number one about the 3080 Ti review. Number two, a lot of people got mad at the idle power consumption numbers, and I don't know what to tell you guys. A lot of other people have the same numbers, and I can confirm with other people, some other benchmarking channels, that they saw that in some of their systems as well. So if your 3080 Ti is idling lower, it's probably because you don't have the same setup as me. You maybe you're not running studio drivers in high performance mode with multiple 4K monitors. You know, what was another card that had horrible idle? Like, for example, I know that Vega 64 had really good idling power usage for the time in multi-monitor, right? There's a difference between what monitors you use, how many, what resolution, and what idle power consumption you'll get. And the point is this. In my system, the 3070 uses about 35 watts idling. And when I say idling, I mean, you know, also maybe on the web, maybe using Microsoft Office, using Excel at the same time, not gaming, not rendering, right? It uses about 35 watts with the 3070. The A6000 uses 65, and the 3080 Ti used almost double that. And the 6800 XT did not use that much while doing basic office work or idling. So apples to apples, GDR6 cards seem to use a substantially larger amount of energy idling, below 100% load, and gaming. And I think that's really worth emphasizing here, because I think people look at gaming and they see, oh, it's a 350 watt card versus a 300 watt card. And they might not know that when the 6800 XT is at 60% load, it's typically actually around 200 watts, 225 watts of power usage. When the 3080 Ti is at 60% load, it's above 300 watts of power usage. So it's also less efficient at, you know, keeping the power usage low at all, basically at everything. And I never got those results with GDR6 Ampere cards. Yeah, and look at someone in the comments in the live chat says this 3090 idles very high with 3 monitors too. Anyone complaining about those numbers needs to understand that I just have a pretty large setup that even while idling, it's not doing nothing. And that's probably who would buy a 3080 Ti too, by the way. I don't know how many people are just running one 1080p monitor off of a 3080 Ti. I hope not a lot of them. But anyways, though, yeah. So I did want to cover that about the 3080 Ti. And then another thing I want to cover. People would be good to remember because people got mad. Anytime I say a mean thing about someone's new toy, they seem to throw a hissy fit, or some people do in the comments. And people would be good to remember that in my 6800 XT review, I also said that was not worth the price at 1,000 at least, which was the cost of the AIB card I had access to. So anyone who's mad I said a $1,200 3080 Ti is overpriced needs to understand that I also said a $1,000 6800 XT is overpriced. So there's no inconsistency here. There's no, it would not hold up in court that I'm biased if I said the same thing about an AMD card, and I did. So that's really all there is. I don't know what to tell you guys. I said the 6800 XT is pretty much barely worth it over like a $500 6700 XT or 3070. If it's 650, if it's 650, you're paying like what, 30% more or more, somewhere, or even 700. You might be paying 40% more than what you would pay for an around MSRP 6700 XT or 3070. And for that much more money, the extra performance, it is about 50% better and it has more RAM. I think it's barely worth it for enthusiasts. But at the same time, I make a big point in my video. How many games have these useless settings that I can't tell the difference between? And I'm someone who likes 4K gaming, so I'm not one of these people that says high resolutions are useless. I don't think they are. But I think it's worth about that much for the top end power performance. But I do not think $1,000 is worth this level of performance over like a $500 6700 XT. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth double the price for most games being, honestly, a lot of games being the exact same experience and most games being the same amount of fun. And I say the same about AMD cards and the same about Nvidia cards. And some people get mad at that. I don't know what to tell you. That's my opinion. You're talking to someone who has a 3060 right there, a 3070 in his system, a 2060 laptop, and an MX 250 laptop. I only have Nvidia cards right now, unless you count like the pile of like really old AMD crap back there. Some of them that AMD said aren't supported anymore with new drivers, which really is kind of bullshit. Saying I'm an AMD bias is ridiculous when all I have is NVIDIA graphics cards for the past half year. So let's just leave it at that. And, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. But, acknowledge that the 3080 Ti is a little ridiculous. Come on. And after that, let me see what else there is to talk about from this month. So yeah, also, let's move on. Well, let me see here. I said I would get to questions as they come. And John Easterling, tipped. He says, with resolution and frame rate increases becoming... Wait, so let me start over. John Easterling asks, with resolution / frame rate increases becoming ridiculous, what changes should we expect to games to make use of increasing performance? So, I don't know. I guess I'm going to call this, put a timestamp here and call it utilizing performance besides... Let's see. Besides res. Remember to hit the like button, everybody. There's over 700 people watching. Hope we can get 700 likes. Except for the people that are mad. I said I don't think a 3080 Ti is worth $1,200 or more. But anyways, to John Easterling's question, it's basically, I think he's saying a lot of people don't seem to want more than 120 hertz. A lot of people don't seem to want more than 1440p. What changes should we expect to games to make use of increasing performance? I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is view distance. This is something where, especially with the asset streaming, both the consoles at least have, that this is ridiculous. We should be able to use the extra performance, I would hope, to not have these like PS2 level graphics in the distance for buildings that just look like cardboard cutouts instead of actual buildings. That we should have real looking people in the distance. Instead of going to 8K, could we please make things more than 5 feet away not look like shit? That is what I would say we should do with the extra performance. Number one. Number two, just image quality. I think that once, I actually do like being above 1440p quite a bit, but I have to admit that around 1800p, it does get harder for me I mean, I can tell the difference between that and 4K, but at 1800p, I really feel like you have enough pixels to really up the image quality a ton. And so things like ray tracing on stuff that doesn't waste performance, like ray traced shadows, so it's consistent. At the very least, so like in Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, using flashlights is much more immersive than in the non-ray traced version. That type of stuff. That's where I would say we should use the extra performance. If I were a dev, I would be targeting, I really would be targeting around, I would say 1800p 100 hertz. That's just me. That's what I like. If I were a dev, I would be targeting around 1800p 100 hertz. And then if you have the highest end card, you can go above 4K 120. And if you have below that, well, maybe you target 1080p 60. That's kind of what I would be targeting. And after that, let's just up image quality, you know. So there, I think I answered that question. I should have switched to the Nvidia lighting while I'm talking about the 3080 Ti, shouldn't I have? Oh, well, what can you do? Let us move on then to FSR versus DLSS. That is another thing that, if you guys can believe it, actually happened this month, which is to say that FSR launched in June. And I don't know. I guess I don't want to dwell on this too much because I think I've talked FSR to death on multiple Broken Silicon episodes and in a couple of videos. I don't think I have that much more to say about FSR right now, except that for a first step, and I know, and people are going to get mad I compare it to DLSS, which I've openly said that they're not the same thing, and they're not even really direct competitors, arguably, but at the same time, what, did FSR come before DLSS? Let's not pretend AMD didn't, you know, bring this out in a response to DLSS. To say you can't compare them at all is a bit absurd to me as well. But if you do compare them, you should be taking performance into account. If you don't take the frame rate boost into account, you didn't even, in my opinion, you didn't even do an analysis of FSR. Like, that's not an analysis. I don't know what the hell you're doing. It'd be like benchmarking a graphics card and not recording frame rate. That's a useless analysis of FSR. That's not an analysis. You didn't do your job. And I would actually worry about ulterior motives if a website did that. But all the people I followed, you know, and usually follow, Hardware Unboxed, Linus Tech Tips, occasionally, Gamers Nexus, and, you know, Tech Power Up, they do a really good job with their charts and organization for reviews. They all said the same thing, which is to say that FSR is undoubtedly better than DLSS 1.0, which DLSS 1.0 just removed the leaves on trees half the time. It was crap vision. It wasn't even crap vision. It was crap vision in an alternative reality where things are different shapes now. Like, DLSS 1.0 is garbage. DLSS 2.0 works in Metro based on what I tested, and it seems generally good in Bannerlord. But, you know, a lot of games still don't look that great to me with it. So I don't know. DLSS 2.0 is a real thing, and it getting supported on every game or more games is only a good thing for competition. But the fact that AMD is closer to DLSS 2.0 in image quality than 1.0 is a huge deal. And again, I'm talking actual gameplay, right? Not pixel counting. I'm seeing real gameplay, playing with it. And can you notice the difference? That's the real test. And FSR is very impressive for a first step. And in fact, I know that FSR 2.0 is coming sooner than a lot of people expect. That they say there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that they're going to improve. So, yeah, I expect pretty much every game to support FSR within a year. And I'd say about a third of games support DLSS. So no matter how you dice it, it's a good thing that you're going to see that in every game, because ultimately I think people are happy with image quality around Ultra 1440p, and they just want to be able to consistently get higher frame rates, you know, at every resolution. With, if all things being considered, they can't tell the difference. That's what really matters, is real gameplay, real effective, can you tell the difference image quality. Not, well, I don't need to repeat myself. And then I should have done it for NVIDIA, but I forgot to, but I'll do this now since I'm talking about Intel. Well, wait, let's see what we got going on here. I know someone sent in a tip. Let's see. Right. So this is a good question here. Let me do Raptor Lake, and then I'll get to this tipped question. So let's see. Raptor Lake. So, and then also people may forget, but in June, actually less than a month ago, I also leaked the Raptor Lake and the entire lineup for Alder Lake in terms of like core counts and segmentation. Um, so, I guess I don't know what else I have to say about Raptor Lake except to say that the Intel did not seem happy that came out. They definitely were hoping to be a secret. They're going to that Raptor Lake's going to be a really a notable upgrade, right? Over Alder Lake, higher IPC, higher clock speeds, and higher core counts. It's a very real upgrade over Alder Lake. Intel is well, all I would say about Raptor Lake is Alder Lake to me looks like something that will be far more competitive with AMD's stuff than frankly anything Intel's had, in my opinion, for the past 3 years. And that Raptor Lake is going to continue that. Now, will it beat Zen 4? I don't really think so. Will Alder Lake beat Zen 3D? I don't know. I think it's going to be competitive in certain segments, but on desktop, AMD is probably going to maintain a pretty firm lead. But again, it's pretty clear that Intel is not sitting still anymore. And that's really exciting, especially after this ridiculous year of horrible availability, which is, well, I guess, yeah, let me say this too before I get to the tips question, because it actually relates to Robbie's question, and that is the shortages. So putting down a timestamp here, I did have it in the title as well, so I have to talk about it. Guys, some of the things I've been told about when it comes to shortages from some of these newer AMD sources and basically every source that I continue to talk to is it really is not TSMC capacity. I think this has been beaten to death by me in multiple videos and podcasts, but I just want to reiterate it again. It's substrate. It's substrate. It's substrate. It's substrate. Every one of these manufacturers is using substrate. New substrate suppliers are coming online, expanding their own capacity, but that takes time. And this is complex stuff. It needs to be verified. There's Q&A, there's quality checks. That's going to happen by Q2 next year. And already you're seeing prices start to come down. At this point, a lot of the shortages from what I'm hearing are just like random things like we can't get enough fans, right? That's a specific thing. Or the power components. There's a lot of things that go into making the silicon products that isn't literally capacity. And if it's not substrate, it's something else right now, but it is improving. And so I'm going to now get to this tipped question, but that's what guys, prices are going to start coming down pretty soon. They already are. I can see it. I watch eBay and I can see the prices slowly coming down by a couple dollars every few days for some of these, scalped graphics cards pretty consistently. So going to Robbie's question then, right? He asks, hello, going in from Apple to building a new PC rig. Oh, so from Apple to building his own custom PC. I'm looking to pair a 5950X with an RTX 3090. But at this point, should I just wait for the Zen 3D and the super variants of the desktop 3090? Well, first of all, I would be careful about assuming there's super variants coming. We've seen rumors of super Ampere cards for like a year and they haven't come out. So will there be super variants for laptops? Maybe, but I wouldn't assume there's going to be a super version of a 3090. I mean, it could only be how much stronger? I don't, like at most, I think they could squeeze out of it is another 5%. And so I guess that's one thing. But then the other thing, let me put that down on the timestamps, like waiting. Like, I think, let's see, do you need to build your PC now? And is now a good time to game? I feel like I keep saying the same answer every month, but to a similar question. If you need to build now, then you need to build now. And it is what it is. Do the best you can. But if you don't need the build to be at the apex of its performance right away, in other words, remember, if you're buying AMD, you could get a nice high-end motherboard and then put like a 3600 in it and then upgrade to a 5950X or to Zen 3D. You can do that, or just get a 5600X now. And if Zen 3D really is this huge increase consistently, then upgrade later. Remember that you can do that. But otherwise, when it comes to graphics cards, like prices are going to start coming down. So Can you get a 3090 for MSRP? If you can, okay. And are you going to use it right now? And are you sure you need like a 24 gigabyte graphics card? The answer is yes. And then you did get it for MSRP. Well, I don't think new graphics cards are coming for like a year. So whatever. But if you're considering spending like scalper prices, like you're considering like $3,000 for this thing or something, you're at the apex of the worst time to buy a graphics card ever. And I did see this a lot in the 3080 Ti comments as well, which I guess let me switch this now to green since we're talking more about Nvidia. A lot of people in the 3080 Ti comments said that I gotta, this advice of getting one or not is ridiculous because if you can get one for MSRP, then this is the best deal in months. And I would say, yeah, no shit. It's the best deal in months during the worst time to buy a graphics card in history. It's not saying a lot, So if you needed a new graphics card and you buckled and paid $1,200 for a 3080 Ti, I hope you're using it now because some of these things may be easier to get in a few months. And there may be 6800 XTs on AMD's website more often than not for $650. Probably not in a few months, but it might be easier. So I just think everyone needs to keep that in the back of their mind as well when they say, oh, but it's a good deal compared to scalper prices. It's like, well, yeah, but you're insisting on upgrading in the worst time in history to build a PC. The worst time in history, auto manufacturers aren't getting enough chips. You're choosing now? Now's the time you choose that you just have to get it? Maybe you need to. But, and again, it doesn't make me popular to talk this way. What would make me popular is telling everyone to buy everything and everything's great and they'll get all that sponsor money. But I'm just being honest. I don't think that's a very legitimate point to say, unless you do need a card now, and then I get it, then you need a card now. I understand. But if you don't, and you're like, I got it because it was the first card I could get for MSRP, and that's why it's a good deal, I would say it's a good deal in the worst gaming market in history. A good deal in the worst market is a pretty bad deal most of the time. So, I really do feel like I need to say that. And so, in other words, to summarize answering Robbie's question, which I think I've been talking about for like 6 minutes straight, I would say this. Number one, should you wait for Zen 3D? I wouldn't wait for it just to wait for it. I mean, either you need a PC now or you don't. And should you wait for a 3090 Super? No, even if it did exist, it'd be 5% better and probably use 400 watts. I would look basically, honestly, if I were you and you really want to build now, I would just watch AMD.com and Best Buy maybe for Founders Edition of Ampere cards like a Hawk. And that's it. And then when you get a new graphics card for around MSRP, that's when you build your PC. Because I'm going to go to AMD's website right now and refresh. Like right now, the 5600X is in stock. And it has been every time I've checked in the past month, actually. And most of the time, the 5800X is in stock. And I would say about 1 out of 4 times I check, 1 out of 4 days, the 5950X is in stock. So I wouldn't worry about, can I get these Zen 3 products? I would say just try to get a graphics card for MSRP. Then if you do, then you build. And I stand by an old adage that you should buy everything at once and build or not. Because if you buy a bunch of components ahead of time, some of the others could just be non-existent or you might end up waiting for months, which is never something I've told anyone to do. Okay. I think I definitely took enough time to answer his question. Remember to like everybody. Let me go to the next tipped ones. Raging Cajun just gives a tip. The Raging Cajun. Isn't that one political guy the bald guy? Thank you for the tip. The Flux Life writes in, when things return back to a new normal, which is what I would say, right? I think people are going to say things are normal before they actually are. Like nothing's really going to be normal until we get like MSRP launches that aren't absurd and you can get stuff. When things return back to a sort of normal, we'll say, will teams red, green, and blue care about price to performance metrics when pricing lineups given what people are paying now? It depends if they overproduce and there's a pricing crash. Let me change colors again here. And then A lot of it depends on what happens to overproduction because I think a lot of these companies right now are deciding to just produce everything because everything's selling, and that makes sense. But at a certain point, you have to go, well, at a certain point, won't they overproduce things? I think they might, but when will that happen? When will supply catch up with demand? And then they also are shipping millions of cards more than they need. My guess is late next year. And if that happens, that's point number one. Point number two is, will Intel truly have because it's still not out, we don't know for sure until it launches, truly have like a 3070 at least competitor for a really aggressive price? It depends. Will there be overproduction? When will supply meet demand? And will Intel be aggressive? To your question of price to performance metrics, it's competition. Right now, there's not competition. So will they care about price to performance metrics in the future? Yes. It just depends when there's competition again. And I think we could see it as early as Q1 next year, but I would think definitely by the end of next year. To say price to performance is gone forever, I don't feel like it is, but I will admit that I would have never talked this way in the past. In the past, I would have said, of course not. It's just a bad time to buy. And seeing people just buy up all this stuff makes me go, I don't know. Not to mention inflation makes it even worse and kind of makes people just spend on things they really don't need because why not in it too. So, there's that as well. But price to performance is going to matter in the future. I think I need one more gen of complete insanity before I double down on that. And everyone's expanding capacity. So let me see. All right. Let me move on. Another thing that I want to plug is that just again, the Patreon, the next guest for Broken Silicon is going to be a game dev from Massive Damage Games. So this is someone who's worked on games that were in the top spot of Steam. This is a real game dev, someone who does the graphical art, someone who knows a lot about the programming and the hardware that goes into it, someone who talks to a lot of devs who do the programming. He said he's had long conversations with devs about, in fact, if they'd rather have Vega or a 1080 Ti in a console, which was an interesting question, apparently, to some devs. Most people would say a 1080 Ti, but apparently not all devs agreed. And, what devs thought about ray tracing when it was first announced, So what I'm saying is, this is even just plugging this to my patrons that are already patrons watching. Don't miss that post for questions. People keep asking to get a real dev in. I've got a real dev. Ask them the questions. You can ask them about hardware, multi-platform development, games, the state of games journalism, the state of, hardware, programming for it, anything. Make sure you use that resource. Remember, if you support Boys Law is Dead on Patreon, you get to ask free questions and ask guests questions as well. In addition to, getting the ad-free version of it, there's a lot of stuff you get. All right. Lorenzo Dal Molin writes in, thank you for the tip. And he asks, what do you expect regarding DLSS versus Fidelity FX Super Resolution? Will Fidelity FX be in most games in a year or so? And what would that do to NVIDIA? So will it be in most games in a year? I think most new games, yeah, actually. I think unless NVIDIA just pays devs not to use it, but from what I'm hearing, that's not a thing really. Or at least for most of the part, it isn't. So in other words, what do I expect regarding DLSS versus Fidelity FX Super Resolution? In the short term, I expect NVIDIA to ramp up their spending for DLSS support. And the reason they'll do that is for two reasons. One, so they can say they actually have more support than FSR, which right now is true. And number two, because it's free advertising. Well, it's not free. They paid for it. But, if they pay to implement DLSS into a game and then you're playing the game and you look at the graphics settings, you see DLSS there? That's an NVIDIA ad. NVIDIA just snuck into the graphics menu every time you look at it. So I expect NVIDIA to double down, just like they did with G-Sync, and just pay for more of them and pay for it to be as ubiquitous, if not more so. And then also try to improve it further so they can at least claim they have an image quality win, which right now it depends on the game, actually. I don't know. I don't want to get into the image quality talk anymore. It depends on the game, though. But they claim they can claim they have better image quality in some games, at least. So that's what NVIDIA will do. AMD, I think, is just going to work to make sure as many devs as possible use it and then improve the quality. Now, what will that do to NVIDIA? In the short term, I don't know. Not a whole lot, honestly, except for make it so that people can't consistently make the argument that DLSS is a godsend when FSR is already pretty impressive. Long term, if AMD, as I'm told they might, improves FSR to the point that it's basically the same quality, then I mean, that just makes, again, it's just going to be a repeat of FreeSync versus G-Sync, where G-Sync comes out first. A lot of people swear by it. Then FreeSync comes out and people get really excited. It's just as good and lower latency. Actually, it's very similar to G-Sync and FreeSync. And then, well, guess what? Where's all the FreeSync monitors? It takes a while to actually get into everything, but then it does. And then Nvidia doubles down at first, but then just kind of pivots to basically making G-Sync FreeSync. That's what I think we're going to see play out over the next few years. So, yeah, I think that answers your question pretty well. Let me see here. So let me write this down as a timestamp. So TSMC Intel 3 nanometer. So Leet Bongmaster writes in, and thank you for the tip. And he asks, do you expect AMD to struggle in the server market with Intel acquiring 3 nanometer from TSMC? My answer is this. If AMD struggles in the server market in like 2023, 2024, it's not going to be just because Intel is using TSMC for some of their products. And you shouldn't assume they're going to use TSMC for their server ones necessarily. They might, but I think you'd be better betting that that's for their DG3 or DG4 graphics cards. And furthermore, AMD's already bought capacity for TSMC 3 nanometer based on what I've heard. So it's not like Intel is likely to have a huge advantage there. So that's all I would really say. Do I expect AMD to struggle in the server market with Intel? I expect them to have more competition than they've had recently, at least in terms of benchmark comparisons. But I don't expect them to just fall apart compared to Intel because Intel is using TSMC. AMD's architectures themselves are very good. Wait for from what I'm heard as well, Zen 3 to come to 12 nanometer global foundries. It's actually a newer 12 nanometer, and then we can compare 12 nanometer to Intel's 14 nanometer quad cores that are still on the market, and look at Zen Plus versus Coffee Lake. Coffee Lake had higher gaming performance, but in terms of efficiency, AMD was there next to Coffee Lake, and they arguably had an inferior node to Intel. So it's not just the node making AMD do well. That's a big thing for a lot of them, but AMD's architectures are good in and of themselves. And the thing is, Intel needs to get their architectures up to speed and their foundries. It's kind of up in the air for both right now. So if Intel gets to the same foundry level as AMD, AMD is still making great architecture. So struggle is not the word I would use, at least for what I expect. Let me see here. 1 second. Someone knocked on my door. I'll be back in a minute. Sorry, guys. I have to answer the door. Hopefully I didn't lose too many viewers. Anyways, RIP Tom, I'm gone for 30 seconds. Anyways, well, the people who left will miss this. Now let's talk about 6600 XT pricing. 43, 45. There's timestamps anyway, so people in the future watching this won't even care. Okay. Yeah, I do. There's proof of legs, right? So let me switch this because we're going to talk about AMD again. I need to get better at switching that on the fly. Anyways, so I'm not willing to do a leak video about it yet because I really am suspicious of this. But from the sounds of it, the 6600 XT is possibly going to be priced. I don't know. So here's... let me ask you guys this in the comments. Put down what you let's all come to a common understanding, right? The 6600 XT. Let's say it performs. Let's say beats the 5700 XT by 10% in 1080p, which I think it could. In the live chat, how much do you think that should cost? The 6600 XT is, let's say, a 200 watt 5700 XT in 1080p, a little better in 1080p, a little worse in 1440p, and it has 8 gigabytes of RAM. How much would you want to pay for that? Oh no! Oh my goodness! Kepler's in the comments. Most of you, a lot of you are just screwing around. 429. First of all, 429 doesn't really make any sense. The 6700 XT is 480, at least on paper. So an on paper price of 430 doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Because keep in mind, the 6700 XT has 50% more RAM and 20-30% more performance. But yeah, I think it should cost 300 if AMD wanted to be aggressive. I think 350 is the most they should charge, and I think 320 would be okay because it will beat this 3060, and it will, and then it'd be $10 cheaper. I think 320 if I was AMD is what I would do. But Kepler, who is a Twitter leaker I'm aware of, just said 399. So, yep, I've heard 399. For the 6600 XT. And feel free to share a timestamp to this on Twitter. Anyone watching, I've heard 399. And here's what I think. I'm not doing remember, guys, remember this too. I'm the one who confirmed 480 for the 6700 XT first. So this isn't coming out of my ass. All right. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. And then, of course, Kepler says 399. So would be not surprise me if he knew something. But here's what I'm also going to say about it, though. I really feel like AMD is just testing the waters. I know it's not finalized. So what I would recommend is everyone make it clear online that they will be mad if it's $399 because they're considering it. And if I remember correctly, AMD was considering something like what? I think they were considering like $250 for the 5500 XT. So they ended up making it $199 or $189. They did lower the price a bit, to my knowledge, from what they were going to do. And they were considering $500 for the 6700 XT. They were considering, what was the original 5700 XT price? Wasn't it like $450 or something? So it's not locked in. Listen to me closely. It's not locked in. I don't want people misquoting me like they have so many times in the past during a live stream. But they're considering it. They're considering $399. So I would recommend sharing that and saying you're not happy, the same way people did about a lot of prior things they've considered. From my perspective, it's going to beat the 3060. It's going to use, let's even just compare it to the 5700 XT. It will use less energy. It will be a bit stronger in 1080p, I think, although I'm not 100% sure. Well, I just have to see, but 64ROP suggests to me it will. But it's probably not going to be stronger in 1440p because of the Infinity Cache amount. So basically, AMD is launching something a little smaller than a 5700 XT in die size, so it is a little cheaper to make with the same amount of RAM, with lower power consumption. I think 350 is the most they should charge, especially when you consider it only has 8 gigabytes and the 3060 Ti will undoubtedly be like 20% better, and at all resolutions probably. Maybe not 20% better in 1080p, but at least 10% better, and then in 4K and 1440p. Even if it only has 8 gigabytes, there's probably some settings you can turn down to make it work in most games. So, yeah, I mean, I think 400 is absurd. If they do that, I don't know. But, and I've actually also heard that they don't plan to sell it from their website. So they're kind of letting AIBs go wild with it, just so you guys know. But I think that 400, I guess maybe they could argue the 6700 XT is 20% more for 20% more performance. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. I would say 350. And the reason I'm not doing a big leak video is I know the price isn't finalized. So I guess I'll let you guys know that now. I said I would talk about 6600 XT pricing and launch a little bit in this video. I think that 300 is what it should be if the market was back to normal. And I think they'd win a lot of gamer goodwill if it was 300, which is still, guys, let's be honest, $300 is $20 more than what the 5600 XT was. So I think, I think that makes some sense, but 400 is just absurd if that's what they do. Yeah, I guess I don't have much more to add besides that. I guess I did want to say it so that if they actually lock down that price, I can claim I'm the first, or at least one of the first people. I don't know if anyone else has talked about it, to say this in public, but yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Although I really get the suspicion it's really going to be like 350 or something, but we'll see. All I can say is they're actually considering it. All right, so let me see. I don't see any tipped questions. Remember to like the video as usual, just a reminder. Let me move on to some reader mail. So I'll put here patron reader mail A6000. And where are we at in the time? 50 minutes and 30 seconds. I think this was a good decision to start taking tip questions in between the notes I have to get to. Oh, someone writes in. Let's see. I'll get to that after this reader mail here. Legend of O. Remember to tip. You can ask questions live. So A6000 and 3080 Ti. QH Freddy writes in, just like you guys can for free if you support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And he says, I would guess it's pretty safe to assume the A6000 is the nicest card you've had recently. Recently, yeah. Which other ones that you've had have impressed you the most and disappointed you the most? Anything that surprised you in particular? Yeah, and nice cards is what I'll put here. So that's a good question. Radeon 7 impressed me in how visually appealing it was. I thought the special edition of the Radeon 7 actually was, and remember that I went from the Radeon 7 to a 3070, which again, people will call me a fanboy. I kept the 3070 because I like it. You know, I went from a Radeon 7 to a 3070, and the Founders Edition of Ampere's build quality is incredibly impressive and high end. I especially like the 3070's form factor and how solid it feels. And I would say the 3080 Ti's build quality was very good as well. You know, I'm not dissing the build quality of the Founders cards. The only other cards that have come close to that is A6000 and the special edition Radeon 7. There's something about the exact shade of red they chose and the metal feel of it, the zero flex. The Radeon 7 really did feel high end. Outside of that, you know, so it's like, you know, I would say the nicest cards I've handled are the Ampere Founders cards in the Radeon 7. And A6000 obviously was incredibly impressive in terms of just how solid it felt. Outside of that, I mean, that's what I would say. Cards that disappointed me, I'll admit the 290X reference cards felt pretty cheap. like it is very clear that AMD didn't just put a 7970 cooler on the 290X, but that they put a cheaper 7970 cooler on the 290X. And that's why that card was so loud in the reference version and so hot. There's no way around that. That one, when I saw it in person, it didn't look like complete crap or something, but it didn't feel as high quality as the reference 7970. And otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to be honest. A lot of the mid-range graphics cards, especially below 200, used to kind of feel cheap, like real cheap plastic to me. You don't really see that anymore, though, because AIB cards are so goddamn marked up. They're putting the nicest plastics and metals on it. So I don't really see that much anymore. But in terms of, yeah, like the Gigabyte RX 560 felt cheap to me, you know, and the MSI one felt more solid it's a $100 graphics card. But I mean, you don't want it to feel like, you know, Mega Blocks plastic, if you know what I mean. Just that cheap, brittle plastic. But yeah, so I guess the most disappointed cooler I've seen in person is the 290X for being a flagship card, which AMD really should have made the 290X 600 with a nicer cooler. And then the ones that have impressed me the most is Ampere Founders, A6000, and the Radeon 7 Special Edition. I'll also say that I did see a 6700 XT reference in person recently, and I actually thought it looked pretty nice. It's not to say that AMD's reference coolers right now don't look nice. They look way better than most things ever used to look. It's just the Founders Edition for Ampere looks so absurdly nice now that it, you know, it's not as impressive after holding a 3070 or something. So Kenahoon 25 writes in, hey, Tom, no question. Just want to validate what you've been saying about the 6800 XT. I have a 9900K and a 6800 XT Red Devil, and I'm able to play pretty much all games at 4K Ultra 120. And I play newer games like Outriders and Resident Evil 8. With such performance, it makes me wonder if it's even worth upgrading to RDNA 3 or RDNA 4. Can't speak about RDNA 4. I would say upgrade when you want the extra performance or when it makes sense for you. Never just do it to do it. I agree, and I've been pretty happy with the performance I have now for a while. I really only upgrade when I can trade up for the same price or making a profit. Like the Radeon 7 for me really hit the sweet spot in performance and VRAM amount. I traded it kind of for a 3070 because the 3070, I didn't trade it, actually made money, of course, for the 3070 because the 3070 was better in my encoding apps, and I mean, it was 20% better in performance, 30% better, so it's worth it. Even if it wasn't for the encoding, I wouldn't have gone to less VRAM, to be honest. But but like this level of performance, I have no problem with the image quality. I think the 2080 Ti, 3070, 6700 XT, that level of performance is probably enough for the overwhelming majority of people. You just almost every game's like 4K 60 at least. You can get to 100 Hertz with ease if you turn down a few settings. That's what I recommend to most people. Let me get to this reader mail here from someone who tipped. Legend of O writes in, thoughts on future small form factor trends. I hope the RX 6600 XT fits in my LZ7. Love the channel. In terms of small form factor trends, I mean, first I'll plug Not From Concentrate, or NFC. He has an excellent small form factor channel. He seems to come on every year and a half. We always love talking about things like the Fury Nano and compact versions of Nvidia 70 and 60 series cards. I talked to him about that. I'll plug that podcast episode. That's really good if you love talking form factor, and then go to his channel as well. Make sure you subscribe to him. But I mean, the trends of small form factor, I just think ITX is here to stay as the standard. You're going to start seeing some manufacturers play with these smaller than ITX form factors, with laptop RAM form factors onto a full PCIe Express slot or something like that. You're going to start seeing people play with that more. But for the time being, there's the issue of reliable PCIe 4.0 riser cards. So I think you're going to see a lot of builds for the next year not use riser cards if they can help it. So you're going to see a lot of cube PCs for a little bit, especially because graphics cards have just gotten bigger because of Ampere. And then because AMD's AIBs then go, well, if they're going to charge $2,000 for an Ampere card that uses 400 watts, let's overclock RDNA 2 and sell it for the same price. So I think you're going to see a lot of cube and more bulky builds this year and for the remainder of the year. But, I have a PCIe 4.0 riser card, and it worked fine. I validated it at full 4.0, no performance losses, but I had a really short one. The longer ones don't really work, usually, unless they're super expensive. And I think technically they're not legally or whatever PCIe 4.0. They just can claim it works most of the time. So I don't know. I think then you're going to see a year from now, they play with the smaller form factors when they get riser cards working and stuff like that. But then we have PCIe 5.0 coming from Intel already. I think that won't stop anyone. I think 4.0 is more than enough. You'll still just have people use an Alder Lake system with 4.0 riser cables on a 5.0 PCIe. So that's where I think the trends are going. I think it's going to be a little more cubey and bulky in the short term. And I think long term, you're just going to see kind of the standards we already have established. ITX, riser cards, once we can get riser cables that work well with 4.0. And you'll see them in a year start playing with the sub ITX form factors because they're out there, and you could make things even smaller if you wanted to. I believe there was another tipped question that I need to get to, though. So Jacobs von Staden writes in, recalling seeing Apple is going after leakers with lawsuits, would you still continue with the channel if something similar happens from, say, AMD and Intel? That's a hard question. And I do know that I've been getting noticed by some AIBs, and I won't say which of the big three, but they have been reaching out to me about some of my leaks lately. So I'm starting to really get noticed, and it is something I've been thinking about. From my perspective, I kind of refuse to sign NDAs. I've never signed one for any of these companies, And as long as I don't sign an NDA, there's really nothing they can legally do to me for the most part in the US, right? They can go after people who leak to me, but I'm very careful with my sources. there's really nothing they can do to me. So I don't know about the specifics of the Apple lawsuits. I don't know if they're suing people who broke NDAs, but I never planned to sign NDAs with these companies, so I can't get sued. If someone tried to bully me with a lawsuit, I'm not sure what I would do. I would probably consult with a lawyer I trust about how bad it really is, and then do a Kickstarter to defend it and try to establish some kind of precedent so people can't get bullied. That's what I believe I would do. Don't know for sure until it happens, but that's really the best I can answer that question. That's a good question, though. That was a very good question. Let me put that down as a time stamp around there. A lot of timestamps on this one. We're moving here, people. And then let me put another one for this next question from a patron. Hitman McNoob writes in, "Hi, Tom. In the past, you've expressed some concerns about the long-term reliability of Ampere. This was around the time that it came to light that the GDDR6X on the top-end cards run was borderline on the max operating temperatures Micron suggests, especially for the Founders cards. As there hasn't been an official line from Nvidia on this, I wonder if you'd heard anything from your sources on this, and whether you expect this to potentially manifest in issues during the card's lifetime." Well, right away, something that comes to mind is the fact that I know there were blower versions of the 3090 for OEMs, and I do know an OEM contact that says, yep, those were canceled after about a month of us trying to use them. He's like, even at stock settings, even not under 100% load, blower versions of the 3090, even with beefy heat sinks on the blower card, like, kind of A6000 caliber blowers, were hitting 110 degrees on the VRMs, on the memory, 110 Celsius pretty easily. And so they just stopped making them. I would love to get a hold of one of those if I could get one for a good price, by the way, just to test it. So if there's any OEM here who has a blower 3090 and is willing to give me a deal on it, I would consider it. But I always say people over worry about the temperatures of their cars, but 110 degrees 24/7, that's probably not good, though. That's not good. You don't really want to be above 100. You don't want to be above 105 24/7 or often, I would say. That's really the problem. Especially if it's literally the GDR6X chips, not the hotspot or whatever that means. Because the hotspot temperature is different than, if the actual silicon's getting that hot and such. But yeah, I mean, am I worried about Ampere reliability long term? The best answer I can give is I would be more concerned than cards that aren't getting that hot. And I don't normally admit that because I think, again, people blow temperatures out of proportion. But yeah, I don't know. I do feel like GA102. I know that Samsung's yields aren't as bad as Nvidia painted them. They're really not bad. But I still do worry a little bit that they pushed Samsung's capabilities on that node to its limits with the GA102 cards in a similar way to they did with Fermi. And Fermi had horrible reliability. As far as we can tell, Ampere's reliability may be a little lower than Pascal, but there's not a whole lot of evidence from someone I would trust on that yet. And it doesn't seem like we're seeing mass failures right now. So for now, I wouldn't worry outside of I think you're getting ahead of yourself if you worry. But is it a concern of mine? It's still a concern. It's still a concern. I do think they pushed Ampere to its limits with GA102 and GDR6X. I really think they did. Past what Samsung was kind of meant to do with their, even if it's a custom 8nm node. All right, so let us move on then to, let's see here. Don't see any tipped questions. Going to continue with the patron questions that, of course, you can ask for free if you support Moore's Law's Dead on Patreon, which we really do need your support. Illyrium writes in and he asks, considering the prices of RDNA 2 and Ampere, aren't we better off waiting for RDNA 3 instead? The 6600 XT doesn't sound like it will be a good deal for the mainstream. Correct. And at least it doesn't sound like it will be. I have some hope, but yeah, I don't know. I just told you guys it probably won't be. And Navi 21 already came out 8 months ago. I'm not including Hopper because you haven't told us when it's coming out yet. I kind of have actually, guys. But anyways, yeah. So would you wait for RDNA 3 instead? I don't even think it's just about RDNA 3. I think the launch of DG2 and RDNA 3 and substrate issues being worked out next year all at the same time is what I would wait for. I would not pay scalper prices now. I just wouldn't. That's the best answer I can give. And if RDNA 3 really doubles performance again, I mean, guys, come on. That's going to be some pretty fun performance, So I would say that right now, these companies are all innovating on performance far more than they were 5 years ago every year. And so you can look forward to performance increases every year and a half. And so just keep that in mind if you're like, should I buy now or wait? Do you need something now? Is it worth the price to you? If it is, get it. If it's not, new stuff's coming every year. And that wasn't always true. That was not always true. We had quad core stagnation, and Pascal lasted like over 2 years, didn't it? Like, I mean, there used to be more stagnation. If you bought like a 1080 for $500 around when it came out, you didn't need anything for a long time. That was a better deal. That's not really true anymore. New stuff's going to keep coming. So let us move on. God, I think I'm going to kill my voice, guys. Let us move on to Windows 11 questions. Hey, Tom, as a guy going through UX UI bootcamp, I was just as baffled as you were by many of the changes Microsoft made for Windows 11. As someone who actually uses the full screen start menu option on my PCs, both for aesthetic reasons and the fact that my primary rig is hooked up to a TV in my bedroom, I find the Windows 11 UI to be suboptimal for anyone who isn't sitting at a desk or using it on a tablet. Oh, so you mean like okay. So anything in between that. I suspect that Microsoft's research, which is a key component in UX UI design, was heavily focused on tablet and or laptop users over traditional desktop users and gamers. That might explain some of the functionality useless changes. The rounded corners, they might be trying to steal away iOS users, moving the taskbar to the center, where you'd be less likely to accidentally activate the start menu while shifting your grip on a tablet. Oh yeah, that is true. I mean, I don't really have much to add to that, except that, yes, I would agree. Microsoft is clearly building this for, I don't know, casual desktop, laptop, and tablet. And it reminds you of Windows 8, doesn't it? We'll just have to see how it works out. Which I actually didn't dislike Windows 8 overall, but I know most people did. Peter Moore writes in, do you expect laptops with Intel Alder Lake CPUs to be the first ones to come pre-installed with Windows 11 from the factory? I expect them to be at the forefront and to be a big marketing move by Intel and Microsoft, whatever generation core architecture launching now with Windows 11. I expect that, but the very first ones, I don't know, that's probably going to be like Tire Lake and Cezanne stuff, those sorts of things. Okay, still not seeing any tipped questions. Let's see. Linux rules. Yeah, okay. Still no. Let's see here. Yeah, still no tip questions. So continuing. Remember, guys, I'm pretty much going to be done within 20 minutes. So if you do want to ask a question in the live chat with the tip, do it. Otherwise, this is your chance. I'm not going to do what I usually do, where I just wait for a bunch of tip questions at the end for like an hour. It's just, this is your time to tip now. For those who don't know, I'm changing the format. So remember to hit the like button too. All right, done shilling. Savanos writes in, just like you guys can if you support us on Patreon, and he asks, Intel just announced that they are closing the production of Lakefield-like CPUs. What is your opinion about that? I don't really have an opinion about Intel stopping Lakefield production. Lakefield was always meant to be a kind of test architecture for Big Little on Windows. Lakefield was created, for two reasons: to pioneer their 3D stacking and that sort of stuff in something that's low power, cheaper, less complex than what you're seeing with Ponte Vecchio, and then also to give Microsoft some time to program for Big Little early for like over a year. That's all Lakefield was for. They weren't planning to take all of this market share with Lakefield. It served its purpose. So stopping its production, oh, no surprise. And in fact, Alder Lake N's going to make Lakefield completely useless, and that's coming out soon. So it makes complete sense to me. Benjamin Cannon writes in, Anything new you can say regarding what is after Meteor Lake? I remember you saying it is absolutely revolutionary, and Jim Keller helped with it. You guys, you keep asking for me to tell you what's in Meteor Lake and after it. I'll tell you when I feel safe to and when I am ready. I might hint at a couple things in an upcoming video, but for now, I've told you what I'm willing to tell you, which is that the IPC increases Intel is planning to bring after 2022 are massive. And I've been saying they've been looking to evolve the x86 instructions and architectures in a radical way. And if you look at them partnering with Sci-Fi for RISC-V, that goes hand in hand with what I've been telling you. They're like stuff they're planning. They're planning to really move onwards. And, that's really all there is to say. Do not expect, because Alder Lake should bring it like around a 20% single threaded performance boost. Do not expect it to stop at Alder Lake or Raptor Lake or Meteor Lake. That's just getting started from what I'm hearing. That those are small IPC increases compared to what they're going to try to do in a few years. So that should tell you all you need to know. In terms of thread counts, how many more threads do we really need on consumer? Both AMD and Intel are looking at doing interesting things with thread counts. We'll just leave it at that. All right. Jan Benice writes in, assuming chiplet design in RDNA 3 and AMD hinting on all future CPUs having GPU capability to some extent, is it more likely that there will be a GPU chiplet on the CPU or that there will be a very basic GPU on an IO die? Or there will be both, or maybe just neither, maybe just a separate GPU chiplet, right? Maybe X processors having minimum GPU capability, while G processors have full GPU chiplets and work on 1080p60 level gaming APUs. Yeah, it's going to be a mix of both, right? I would say as a non CPU architect, it would make kind of more sense, in my opinion, that they put the GPU on an IO die or separate chiplet. That's what I would expect them to do, especially if they're going to continue to share core chiplets with Epic and such. I think the IO die makes the most amount of sense, especially if they put like a small, like single-threaded or dual-threaded core on there so that you could almost just power on a motherboard, or you could just power on a motherboard with just an IO die. That'd be awesome for like $10 boot kits for a, motherboard. That's kind of what I would expect, but I can't claim to know for sure or anything. All right. Endless Logins writes in, summary, when AMD releases a CPU chip set compatible with DDR5, will the Infinity Fabric be updated, replaced? Yes. I mean, of course. Currently, you can improve latency with the Infinity Fabric by picking a specific speed for the DDR4 RAM modules. The DDR4 modules running between 3200 to 3733 megahertz seems to be the sweet spot. When AMD supports DDR5 RAM, will they increase the Infinity Fabric speeds for one-to-one compatibility, or will they replace Infinity Fabric as we know it? Finally, how high would you expect speeds to be? I think I've already covered Raphael's DDR5 speeds. I think it was above 4800 megahertz. I think I said 5200 megahertz. You'd have to check my leak. I don't remember off the top of my head. But in terms of like changing the Infinity Fabric, honestly, that usually gets a little bit out of the purview of what I do. I try to give you the big picture, the pricing, the performance, the efficiency numbers, the core counts, that type of stuff. To say like specific per architecture things this early, that's just not really what I even try to do. So I'll just leave it at that. But to think they wouldn't change Infinity Fabric with DDR5, of course they will, I think. Okay. Ugh, I think I'm making my voice go hoarse. Okay, so that is all of the things I had to get to in the script that were on my list. I will go then probably for maybe another 15 minutes or so, depending on if we get any good questions in the live chat. I have been watching the live chat, and I was prioritizing tip questions and patron questions. Also, of course, if you're a patron in the Discord, remember you can submit questions right there in the After Video channel right now, and I might get to them. So for free. All right. Let me see here. See if there was any good questions that I want to answer. Why do you think the mobile gaming industry went to shit? From Adamaris Tibia. I mean, no real effort in making games, just for profit development and notorious ads. Oh, I mean, I'll answer that question. I like that one. Mobile gaming. The reason mobile gaming went to shit is because there was a race to the bottom. People were used to paying nothing for apps on the iOS and Android store. And so they said, well, why would games cost anything too? Which is really kind of a bizarre thing. Early on in mobile gaming, mobile smartphone gaming, EA was trying to charge 10, 20, 30, $40 for some of their ports. So was, I think, Square Enix and multiple companies, but people didn't buy them. Unfortunately, people voted for their wallets that they don't want to pay for games if a few other clickbait games don't charge for it. And what happens? A race to the bottom. And when a race to the bottom happens, there's no money to profit off of a big game on mobile. Really, most of the big games that are AAA experiences on mobile are kind of just ports of what's already on PC or console. So that's what happened. People didn't pay for games, and it kind of ruined mobile gaming, at least non-Switch or whatever gaming. The people that wanted a dedicated console experience, bought a Vita or eventually, in way higher numbers, a Switch, and abandoned mobile. And that's also then where the AAA devs went if they wanted to make a mobile game people would pay $40 for. They went to the Switch. They didn't go to mobile because no one's buying it on the App Store. And that's something I would worry about with people that claim you can get a bunch of games for free. I mean, it ruined the mobile gaming market. I just hope it doesn't happen to other markets. But I know Apple's trying to make it better. We'll just have to see if over time things get better. And then, if you don't charge, then what are you going to do? You're going to put a bunch of ads in it, which again, if you don't charge for a game, they usually load it up with ads. Sometimes they do both, unfortunately. And if you don't want ads in games, then pay full price, or I shouldn't say pay full price, pay for the game. I rarely buy games full price. Silver Tree writes in, when is AMD going to get their integrated graphics on desktop to be able to do quick sync like stuff? I guess I'll put a timestamp there. Or kind of. Quick sync AMD. I think I've answered this question a few times before on Loose Ends, but I'll answer it for you. Thank you for the tip, Silver Tree. Why doesn't AMD have quick sync like stuff? Well, I mean, they focused Zen 1 through Zen, especially Zen 2. Zen 3, they focused on IPC, but Zen 1 through Zen 3 so far has been about adding cores and adding IPC. And I mean, AMD has so many cores for a better price than Intel that they didn't need quick sync. I think from AMD's perspective, it's like you guys would be good to go check some Intel architectures and look up how much of the architecture or the die space for like Skylake, Kaby Lake, especially Broadwell, is taken up by the graphics. I think Broadwell was like half graphics, 2/3 the graphics part, right? So if you're AMD and you go, well, we can make it take up half of the die, or we can just have 16 cores. And which one's going to render faster? Probably the 16 cores. Now, moving forward, is they focused more on IPC in a similar way to Intel did from Sandy Bridge and onward. I think you'll see them integrate graphics and have a quick sync-like feature. It's just up until now, with their chiplet design offering more cores for less, kind of just made more sense to have only cores and scale up performance that way. But now people probably don't need more than 16 cores, so it makes sense to add graphics, and they'll probably add a quick sync function. So I think that's a good answer. Let me see here. Do we have another question? We do. Michael Kara writes in, Tommy boy, that's me. When will we see GaN substrate materials replace silicon? Oh, GA. So the elements GaN. Not for a decade. I honestly think silicon as the standard. Let me put a timestamp for this. Moving past silicon. Honestly, I think silicon as a standard is I think that's going to be the standard for a very long time because of how cheap it is. And this is something many experts and CEOs and manufacturers have talked about publicly in interviews before, which is that when you're trying to move, I forgot the name of it, but let's say you're trying to move some non-silicon manufacturing method to be better than silicon. You're not asking it to be better than silicon, 10 years ago. This isn't like, or even 20 years ago, like 90 nanometer. It doesn't need to beat 90 nanometer silicon. It needs to beat 3 nanometer to be worth it. And it probably needs to beat it by like 50%. That's a tall order to bring in a new material and ask it to beat existing silicon by enough that it's worth the extra cost to use it. Think about that. Silicon, you can't just be better than silicon. You have to be better than the best silicon and also cheaper. And that's probably not going to be. Silicon's cheap. So I think we're going to start seeing non-silicon products in about 5 or 6 years, but it's going to be for like one tile, and you're still going to have most of it be on silicon. You're going to like 3D stack this new thing for just the cores, and it's crazy expensive, but hey, it's worth it to get like a, whatever IPC increase and have it. So, especially with 3D stacking, if you had one tile that's not silicon that can afford to get to way hotter temperatures, which I know some of them can, well, there you go. Having said that, though, it would also expand and contract at different rates than silicon. So that would be hard to build for in 3D stacking, wouldn't it? There's a lot that's going to make this hard, and you're going to see monolithic or even non-3D stacking, I think, be the standard for a long time as well. Not everything needs to be 3D stacked. Not everything doesn't need to be on silicon. I mean, heck, Zen 2 didn't even die shrink the IO because even things we're doing now don't even need smaller silicon. So I think you're going to see non-silicon things in about 5 years, but it's going to be very limited. And if it gets into any consumer products, it'll be in a limited way and only part of it. I think it's like a decade before we really have anything that makes us start abandoning silicon. I think it's going to be a long time, I think, All right, so hopefully I answered that question well. I don't see any other tip questions. Ike's writes in from the Patreon, what is your favorite post-silicon solution you've heard of so far? For some reason, I'm blanking. I think I'm honestly getting very tired. I've been talking here for over an hour, and I've been talking a pretty, let me see what I'm honestly blanking. I don't know why. I've even done videos on this. I don't know why I'm forgetting. Like graphene. That's what I was thinking of. Or molybdenum disulfide. I mean, graphene makes a lot of sense to me because of its thermal properties, and it should be pretty cheap as well. And it'll probably be applicable in similar ways that we're already doing it. So that's what stands out to me. The more radical things I'm more skeptical of, or even just things that improve silicon further with nanotubes and stuff. But I think graphene and like graphene nanotubes is what seems to make the most sense if I remember. But I also remember looking at molybdenum disulfide for a while. And so it'd honestly be hard for me to say off the top of my head. All right, let me see here. No trick question. Jesus, I'm falling asleep. No tip questions. So hopefully that means people are just enthralled with what I am saying. I do have a few more, though, from the post on Patreon. So let me get to that. Dr. Forbin writes in, Tom, as we all know, RDNA 2 is on par or better in rasterization performance in Ampere. I think that's what he means to say. Will the rumored Ampere refresh negate using GDR6X and go with just GDR6 and add more RAM? I'm honestly not sure. I think NVIDIA should have used HBM on GA102. So I would actually be a bit surprised if NVIDIA didn't go to HBM. And remember, they don't need to use HBM for all of the lineup, just the top die, and then they can just use normal GDR6 for everything below it. That's kind of what I expect. I think it's pretty obvious GDR6X was somewhat of a mistake. UFU UFU writes in, how much do you think PCIe 4.0 will be important to the performance of RDNA 3? Or in other words, how much do you think PCIe 3.0 will hold back its performance? I think it will. I'll say it. I think in most games and plenty of games, you won't have a difference in PCIe 3.0. But there are some games already where 4.0 can give you a 5-10% boost. When people are willing to pay, what, $1,500 for a 3090 instead of 800 or whatever it usually is for it's usually more, I guess, or Like people are willing to spend twice as much for a 3090 over a 3080, and that's a 10% performance difference. So why you wouldn't also want to have PCIe 4.0 to make sure you're not losing any performance whatsoever is beyond me. I think it already matters in small cases here. And I think with RDNA 3, if they double performance, it's going to be a huge thing, actually. I think you will want PCIe 4.0 for RDNA 3. Lomans writes in, thank you for the tip. He asks, will we see any RX 6000 GPU in Steam hardware surveys before RX 7000 announcement? Guys, I would just say that Steam survey has limited usefulness for measuring graphics card market share because I've talked about this ad nauseum, but I'm pretty sure Nvidia has a system where it somehow has Steam ask you for the survey more often. I've noticed this, and this is an anecdotal evidence, but on an Nvidia system, I get asked to do the Steam survey far more often than I get asked to do on AMD systems. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just noticing it. Maybe just anecdotal, and maybe nothing. But I noticed that. And also, a lot of internet cafes and gaming cafes in Asia use honestly, GTX 1065 gigabytes. That's a thing. Look it up and stuff like that. And so when someone logs on that internet and gaming cafe in Asia, if an entire gaming cafe uses NVIDIA graphics cards, if it has 5 different users on one system a day, that's 5 times it may have been polled. Doesn't explain all of it, but I would say, especially when it comes to GPU portion of the Steam survey, it's limited usefulness. It's there as something you can watch, and you can notice little differences in market share here and there, maybe relatively speaking, but I would not commit to that as a big. I mean, AMD's having record sales, but so is Nvidia. I just leave it at that. They're selling RDNA 2. I wouldn't look to the Steam hardware survey for GPU sales. I wouldn't, Ooh, that one guy writes him, hey, Tom, about PlayStation 5's node switch to 6 nanometer. Assuming this happens, I can't say independently I can verify it yet, but here's what I will, let me write that down as a timestamp as well. PS, I almost put PS6. PS5 on 6 nanometer. So PS5 on 6 nanometer. I think it makes sense, that rumor, if anything, because from what I'm hearing, almost everything's moving to 6 nanometer by the end of next year that can be moved. So if that's true, it doesn't surprise me at all. Sony may do a revision on 6 nanometer. But so I can't say I'm sure it's happening, but it makes I think that rumor makes a lot of sense. But to continue to his question, will they manufacture both 6 and 7 nanometer versions of their consoles simultaneously? I think at first the answer is yes, but over time they'll migrate to mostly 6 nanometer because TSMC, again, guys, look it up, Google it. TSMC is moving customers, kind of shooing them and pushing them towards 6 nanometer for their products anyways. So I think over time, they're just going to kind of switch more and more to 6 nanometer. And so over time, all PS5s will be made on it. But I do think there's going to be a portion of both 6 and 7 nanometer versions. Then he says, completely switching to the cheaper SKU and leaving the current PS5's quirks like existing SSD and RAM cooling issues behind. There's no SSD and RAM cooling issues to my knowledge. Both consoles, or all consoles now, pretty much run coolly to my knowledge. I haven't seen any issues. But he says, but you'd think they'd want to ramp production as much as possible. Please give us your thoughts. Yeah, that's all I'd have to say. If you're referencing that bizarre thing of the RAM running at 90C, the RAM's meant to go at 110. Unless it was running at 110, I wouldn't worry about the RAM in the consoles. But yeah, that's all I can really say. Hardik Bansal writes in, thanks for the tip. How do you think companies like Intel and AMD will fight Apple's 64-core processor that has been rumored for some time now? And remember, I also leaked a 32 plus 8 core version of it as well. How do I think companies like Intel and AMD will fight Apple's 64-core processor? I mean, Bergamo. I've already leaked this, guys. Bergamo. That's how they're going to fight it. That's how AMD is. Dense 128 cores, lower clocked, directly competing with it. And I happen to know Intel's working on some pretty crazy projects that are a lot more than 64 cores, a lot more. And they'll probably compete with it pretty well. So I would just say more cores, clocked lower. And they're both working on it, Let me see. Teaser says, I remember when Tom told everyone that the 60-minute mark was reached. That was getting long. Yeah, well, it is what it is. Most podcasts and live streams I do now seem to be about an hour and a half to an hour 45. So it is what it is. Podcasts usually get longer than that, but we're not trying to make them longer. All right, let me see. No more keep wanting to say trick. No more tipped questions, but we still have a lot of people watching. Remember to hit the like button and share. So let me see what the patrons are asking. Yoda King writes in, do you think, I guess I'll write that down here at a timestamp 1:30. Then killed the pencil, guys. That's how much I care about you writing down the timestamps. I killed a pencil. Nintendo business strategy. So Yoda King asks, do you think Nintendo needs to change their console game dev strategy going forward with Sony and Microsoft getting more aggressive? Well, I mean, right now the Switch is selling pretty goddamn well. And the fact that the Switch update is just what? They gave it a PlayStation Vita screen. I mean, I don't know. I think that what you're seeing with the Switch OLED model, clearly Nintendo plans to keep selling the same Switch model for another few years, which, I mean, for that amount of price, I just think is absurd. But, you know, people like it, so they're buying it and they can't keep it in stock. So it's not like I blame them. So does Nintendo need to change their business strategy? We even do the lights. Is this Nintendo? What color should be Nintendo? Should be that or red? I guess red would probably make the most sense. They're selling everything gangbusters, so clearly Nintendo doesn't need to change jack shit. But long term, I don't know. We'll see how the Steam portable device does if that comes out. And my problem with Nintendo's console business model isn't that they insist on profiting on every console sold. I get it. That's what they do, and it seems to work for them. I get it. My problem is that Nintendo doesn't do things that to me seem like obvious hardware enhancements. Like, for example, I heard that Nintendo could have paid an extra $10 to go from Maxwell to Pascal as the base for the Nintendo Switch. And that would have boosted performance and raw rasterization by 50%. And they could have had a faster ARM CPU as well. So I don't know what the profit margin was on the original Switch. I assume it was at least 20%. I don't get why they didn't just like double the RAM and make it 50% stronger for like an extra $20. I mean, seriously, guys, like, I think it's okay that Nintendo profits, but why not make it so that it could have, you know, lasted longer? I don't know. That's my opinion. And that's my problem with it. But for now, they keep selling no matter what. So why would they listen to me? And Michael Kerr said I missed a question. Now I see it. Thomas the Train. That's me. I did used to like Thomas the Train when I was younger. He asks, with each node step, more transistors are disabled due to heat density being non-manageable. How much performance are we missing? So more transistors are disabled due to heat density. Oh, in terms of maybe exact transistor amount disabled, I see what you mean. How much performance are we missing? Oh, probably just 10%, honestly. I don't know. I don't think, you know, and actually that's not what I'm hearing about TSMC's nodes. Now, in terms of raw transistor disabled, because, right, a Zen 3 core has more transistors, I believe, than a Zen 1 core, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I guess if you disable one Zen 3 core for yields, you're disabling more transistors in a raw amount to you would on Zen 1. But in terms of raw performance change, I don't think it's any different. And from what I'm hearing, Navi 22 on TSMC has absurd yields. Guys, they haven't even launched a cut down Navi 22 to desktop because they didn't need to. They had so few that they'll just send all of the disabled dies as like the 6700M or 6600M, I think it is, or whatever it is. I'm not sure. Or wait, no, 6700M. Yeah. It's because that's the 10 gigabyte model, right? The 6700M. So AMD has fantastic yields with Navi 22. I think Navi 23 will have absurdly good yields. So and I hear that TSMC's 5 nanometer should have better yields than 7, although again, it's more expensive. So I don't know. I don't think we're losing that much performance relative to previous nodes, really, to answer your question. Let me see here. Is there any questions I missed? Vivid Hayes writes in, "You're a good lad, Tom. Thanks for the scoops and content. Do it because I love it, you know." Yeah, the first year I did Bourne's Law is Dead, I made zero money. It actually made it a nightmare trying to get a loan for this house I now live in, because they were like, "You didn't make any money in 2019." And it's like, I had a previous job though. And they're like, "That doesn't count because now this is your job." So I definitely only do it because I love it. And I'm just consider myself blessed that I make enough money to keep doing it full time. Remember, speaking of full time, remember me, Dan, Gerard rely on you to pay the bills. So support us on Patreon if you can. It's like $2 to ask guest questions, get access to the Discord, listen to Die Shrink every other week. $2? I mean, it's a cheap cup of coffee. If you can afford that, that's all I ask. If you can. If you can't, I understand, of course. Alexandru Tudorico writes in from the Patreon, speaking of Patreon, and asks, what would be a good starter video for somebody dabbling in video production? Honestly, I'm not sure I'm the right guy to ask. When it comes to video production, which I actually think I'm pretty good at editing now for the most part, you guys got to remember that when there's an error in one of my videos, I put out so much content. I think the content's pretty high quality for how much I put out. I think the best thing you can do is just mess with rendering and editing yourself, honestly. I never found a video that I followed that I needed. That's me, though. I'm someone, I have ADHD. It's hard for me to concentrate. I learn by doing. I'm someone that learns by doing. So that's the advice I can give for myself. Windows 10 comes actually, in my opinion, with a pretty good free video editor. Now, it limits you to 1080p 30 frames per second, but it's hardware accelerated, so it will render fairly quickly now, especially if you have an Ampere graphics card. I think RDNA 2 now works pretty well on it, or Vega. And it uses Intel integrated graphics pretty damn well as well. Windows 10 comes with a video editor. Just go into Windows 10 and type video editor or photos, and then there's a built-in one in photos, and it actually comes with free visual effects. It's very easy to use. I used it for a long time because you can just drag and drop videos and pictures into the timeline, which for me is an important user-friendly thing. I like being able to take a folder of stuff and just literally drag and drop into the timeline and then edit it from there. Just mess around with that. You don't need to buy one. You don't even need to download one. Windows 10 comes with what I think is a good starter editor. Just start editing. Mess around with the settings. Oh, I didn't know I could do that in this editor. And then once you feel like you're being held back by that free editor, move on to a new one. I can recommend more in the future. That's what I think you should do. Yeah, at least that's what I did. I learned by doing, though. So let me see. Alex Gallagher writes in, do you think RDNA 4 based on MCM is going to mature better than even RDNA 3 is looking like it will? I'm not sure what you mean by mature. I think we're going to see big performance increases from Radeon and Nvidia every year, or at least every year and a half, every generation, bigger than before, bigger than what Turing brought us for a while. So do I think RDNA 4 will be bigger than RDNA 3? It's too early to say. I'd kind of doubt it, but then again, for all I know, it'll be like Zen 3, and it's arguably just as good. So, yeah, some people are saying things like DaVinci Resolve, which I tried out. DaVinci Resolve is very powerful, but I think there's an honest question. If you're going to mess around with a video editor, is it more important for it to be powerful or kind of dumb and easy to use? Because if it's your first editor, I would recommend an easy to use one. You don't need the power necessarily. Like with regards to scaling on multi-chip modules. Well, I mean, yeah. So Alex chimed in again. RDNA 4 may scale better with MCM, but you're still kind of limited by power usage there. And RDNA 3 is the advantage of 5 nanometer, which is a bigger increase over 7 than 3 will be over 5, I think. Although 5 over 7 isn't as big as 7 over 16, of course, not even close. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think DG3 will be bigger than DG2. But then again, what? DG2 is scaling past integrated. So no, it's not actually. I don't know. Hard to say. Too early. Zane Yoder writes in, what's on the table behind me? I mean, I got an RTX 3060 that I still need to test, a GTX 580, 3 GB GTX 580, a 560, a 470, an R9 380, which now AMD doesn't support that in the drivers or with new drivers. It's kind of bullshit. It's too early to abandon the 300 series, I think, but that's what AMD's doing. My YouTube badge, and we got several silicon wafers, right? Several actual silicon wafers here. And there's also a PlayStation Vita there because I don't know where else to do with it. Okay, so let me see, put a timestamp for editing advice. Not seeing any tip questions. We are at an hour 40. Let me see if there's any more interesting ones from the patrons. Probably last call here for tip questions if you want to submit them. Again, remember, hit the like button. Do I think Nintendo could make a better console if they partnered with AMD? Well, Ikes, thank you for that question. I mean, Nintendo could have made a better console if they still partnered with Nvidia. They could have used the Volta-based APU, So there's room for Nintendo to have made a better console. They used Maxwell. They didn't even use Pascal. Do I think Nintendo could have made a better console if they partnered with AMD? Yes, but they also could have with Nvidia. NR94 asks, how long will it take for developers to fully utilize and saturate the next gen consoles? I mean, I think you're going to see games in late 2022 fully leverage the PS5 and the Series X. It's hard to say for Series X because their games are taking so long to come out. For PS5, I'd say late 2022 we'll probably see some pretty crazy stuff. But they'll always be improving it, so it's like, who's to say what fully maximized means, right? I mean, Horizon's going to run on the PS4. That's going to be more maximized than anything before it, probably. That's going to be a 8-year-old console, so they're always getting better. All right, let's see here. Any final questions, people? Have I seen Switch sales? Yep, they're crazy. Selling very well, which is good because Nintendo really needed that. How much of a leap will RTX 4000 be? Well, I kind of already answered that. I said as big or bigger than Ampere, I believe. Do another podcast with Tech Deals. I'm sure I will. Maybe save it for end of year again. I kind of like having them as an end of year conversation, as a big special episode with Dan. Is DG2 going to first come out on mobile? Probably. It's 2021. Why are MLID switches not standard? To be honest with you, my friend, what is that? Oh. Oh, which handles how the iGPU and dedicated GPU are routed to the internal display, so it can switch between the the integrated and the dedicated graphics, which Jared's Tech, friend of the show, was on Broken Silicon, showed how some of the RDNA 2 mobile laptops were held back in performance because they didn't have an MLID switch. I don't know. I don't know why they're not standard. I would think that'd be common sense. Who knows? Yep. I mean, Andrew S. says, who's a mod, says, bomb cost and added complexity. But I've got to say, the fact that it lost 10 or more percent performance, I hope adding the MLID switch wasn't like $20, because if it was worth it, If it's like an extra 100, I guess I get it, But otherwise, ugh. Have I ever tried gaming on Linux? Not anytime recently. The fact is I don't have a lot of time to mess with my desktop or a new desktop because I'm so busy making new videos. Like I'm halfway through a big script and then I took a break to do this loose ends today. So I don't really have time to like put my desktop out of commission or build very often anymore. Gorbaz the Dragon, who I know is QH Freddy, says, well, the laptop guys are dropping 10% performance to save $5 on memory. Yeah, except maybe it's the only memory they could get a hold of, right? Because of shortages. That's the only thing I would say to defend them for using cheap memory that holds back performance. One core, 8 thread would be funny. Yeah, I think you're more likely to see 4-way SMT, not 8 right away. And that probably won't be for a little bit. Where do I get the energy? I already told you I have ADHD. The honest truth. It is a blessing and a curse. All right. Final call. I've said it like 3 times, but I'm just going to double check. Any good local co-op PC games? Yes. Get A Way Out. It's called A Way Out. A Way Out? I don't know if I think it's local co-op on PC and console. I know I played A Way Out during quarantine with Dan on PlayStation. And then also It Takes Two. Made by the same devs as A Way Out. I haven't played It Takes Two yet, but I got good reviews, and I know a friend who has it and said it was really fun. He played through it with his wife. So I recommend It Takes Two, and I recommend, and any of those cooking VR games are hilarious in local co-op. Absolutely hilarious. In fact, I forgot which one it was. It may have been Overcooked. I don't remember. But we played one of those VR cooking games where someone was in another room with a very long cable as the cook. And then in the desktop room, we had me and a friend being the order people. So someone controlled the guy, and then I was the bus boy. And so I would yell between the rooms in a Boston accent, like, order up. We got a number 5 coming in right now. So I'd have to yell down the hallway to the cook. And the cook would yell to me, order up. And I'd say, hey, waiter, order up. We made it a 3-player game. It was so much fun. So I really do stand by the cooking VR games. You can even turn it into a 3-player game if you do stuff like that. Lawrence Haggerty writes in, thank you for the tip. Scroll up after video chat questions. You missed a fair few. I don't think I did, but I'll square up. I'll square up. I'm tired, guys. I'll scroll up. I don't think I did. I answered that one. I answered that one. Answered that one. Nope. All the questions I can see, I answered. If they're not there, YouTube deleted them. Okay, let's see. What is there any other good co-op games? Oh, and the games by, is it Supermassive? I have to say I've started Man of Medan. It's okay. It's definitely not as good as Until Dawn or Detroit Become Human or Heavy Rain. But Man of Medan lets you do local couch co-op with a controller, so that's fun. So I recommend that one. Have I played Black Mesa? Yes. I still haven't beaten it for some reason. I keep getting pulled away to other games. Oh, I missed questions in the Discord? Oh, maybe. But I think I've answered most of these. QH Freddy writes in from the Discord, just like you guys can if you support us on Patreon. He says, I've been looking at used GPU market earlier today in the Netherlands, and from the RDNA 2 cards, I can basically only find reference cooler models. I'm talking 40 or so listings for all of the RDNA 2 cards. Well, only 4 of them are aftermarket. 2 out of them are 6700 XT. What's up with that? Well, remember, Nvidia really doesn't make a lot of the Founders cards. You're pretty lucky if you get one. I'm lucky that I have a Founders 3070, which is, of course, my favorite version of the cooler. I love how it looks. I love how compact it is. I know some people are like, well, the aftermarket ones are cool better. Yeah, they're also 3 times as big and use more energy. I like that it fits in a compact PC and that the cooler feels like it's made out of bulletproof armor. I like that. That's just me. But AMD makes a lot of reference cards because they actually are trying to have a downward projection on price. AMD's trying to make MSRP real with the cards that have reference coolers. So why you're seeing a lot of the reference coolers? Because AMD's making a decent amount of them, and they probably had some more to sell to AIBs or something. Juzu writes in, thank you for the tip. Any rumors, knowledge on RDNA machine learning chiplets? Nothing I can say right now. How do you quantitatively compare FSR and DLSS screenshots? Well, I think the screenshots have limitations in themselves, in and of themselves. I've noticed that screenshots don't tell you the whole picture. Unfortunately, the best way to test FSR and DLSS is to measure quantitatively the performance boost you get first. The entire point of FSR is the performance boost. If you do not measure the performance boost, you didn't do your job. That is the whole point. And it's obvious. That is the whole point, is to boost frame rates. You have to measure the performance boost of both of them. And then you've got to actually play the game and see if you can tell the difference and then just kind of give an opinion. It's getting blurrier to compare graphics and performance between things, the more we have things that modify image quality. So it's really all I can say. Low profile is dead, kind of. Xerox Park writes in from the Patreon. What is there to say now about the Zen little cores? I have nothing to communicate right now. And in fact, I'm mostly trying to focus on leaks on things that come out in the next 2 years. The reason I do that is I've honestly got some sources saying that they could lose a competitive advantage if I leak things too far in the distance. So, you know, when you see a website say, oh, I know what Granite Rapids and Sierra Forest and all this other stuff, and I know all these things coming, it's like, yeah, I'm aware of Intel architectures out to like 2025, but I've been told that people could get fired if I tell you. So I wait for enough people to say it's safe before I leak it. And so when it comes to like Zen little cores, that's a long ways away, guys. So I don't know why you're worried. It's like 3 years, like, so it's not worth it. Like, who cares, you know? Would a 3060 Ti be better than a 3060 for video editing? If you're on a budget, I would get a 3060 for video editing if they're both MSRP. You know, if it's $330 to $400, that's about even price performance. 3060 Ti is 30% more performance for 30% more price. So would I rather have a 3060 Ti or a 3060? If I'm on a budget and they're MSRP, 3060, there are times I'm video editing where there's a slight slowdown briefly as it like moves RAM in and out from one part of the timeline to another. That's only with very big videos and it's rare, but I do wish my 3070 had more RAM. So if you're getting it for video editing and they're both MSRP, I would kind of lean towards the 3060, which is as strong as a 5700. Plenty of performance for most people. But I haven't reviewed the 3060 yet, so maybe I'll test it and say this thing sucks. We'll have to see. Let's see here. Any other good people saying just get them fired? Well, honestly, if I got people fired, that would hurt me too, because then I will get less info in the future. So I think that's really a short-sighted idea, even if you don't care if they get fired, which I do. My 3090 as well, doubled frame rate for quality difference. I could barely tell though. Yeah. Let me see here. Can a 3060 do 1080p 144? Yeah, of course it can. I mean, remember Ampere's got some high refresh rate issues, but due to NVIDIA drivers for the most part, as Hardware Unboxed found. But yeah, I mean, of course it can. Just turn down some. If you're gaming in 1080p, I think you should be fine with medium settings. So yeah, I'd say a 3060 is fine for 1080p 144 hertz. More than enough RAM too. See, but then that's one of those ones where it's like, then you almost do want the 3060 Ti because in 1080p, it just has more raster if you really want to lock it there. But, you know, in all honesty, for 1080p, what you're probably going to want is the 6600 XT, unless it's $400 fucking dollars, which would be very bad. Lawrence Haggerty writes in, Alder Lake power efficiency makes it likely for GPD win Neo-type devices. How do you think Iris Z will evolve to complement that? Yeah, it sounds like when it comes to integrated graphics for Alder Lake, they're going to have a 2+8. So two little cores, two big cores, 8 little cores, plus graphics stronger than Tiger Lake. You could see that definitely, go into a portable gaming device, and it'd probably be pretty impressive. Having said that, Van Gogh might be competitive with it. We're going to have to see, because there's 4 big cores, 8 threads. So you really be comparing 12 Intel threads to 8 AMD. Depends. We'll just have to see which one's more efficient at that point. And I would expect them to have about even graphics performance. So I think it's like 8 RDNA, like 1.5-ish graphics for Van Gogh. So we'll have to see. My Warzone has been broken since the June 28th patch. Warzone's file management system and patching is a nightmare. It sucks because I actually think it's a pretty fun game. Yeah, reinstall. Yeah, but Warzone makes you install like 200 gigabytes. So you're asking someone to download 200 gigabytes again. It is a problem. Make sure I didn't miss any questions from tipped ones. Jackie Chan, thank you for the tip. All right, guys, that is going to do it. I think I always keep it under 2 hours because otherwise YouTube gets mad at me. We're at 1 hour 56 minutes, so that's going to do it. Remember, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you will get an ad-free version of this in your feed, in the RSS feed, and you get ad-free early versions of Broken Silicon, the podcast Die Shrink, for just $2 a month, and you can ask guest questions. Remember that the next guest for Broken Silicon is a game dev who does graphical art programming. He's the one who made that Lisa Sue pixel art. You guys remember the Lisa Sue pixel art on Twitter? He made it. That game dev's going to be on Broken Silicon, and for another like 24 hours, you can ask him questions. If you're a patron, you can ask him as many questions as you want. So remember to join the Patreon if you want access to that. And just remember that we can't do this without that. And otherwise, thank you to everyone who watches, share, like, subscribe. Don't miss the other videos that have come out, guys. That recent Bergamo leak was a huge scoop by me, I believe. And don't miss the RDNA 3, Raptor Lake, all that as well. And then I guess, as always, thank you for watching.